Did you know that Lego used to make wooden toys, and the only reason they stopped was because a fire burned down the warehouse with all of the inventory? This is just one weird fact about vintage Lego that you've probably never even heard of. And there are 21 more in this video. So I hope you're ready for a lore dump, because we're getting right into it with the fact that certain minifigures in 1978 had stickered torsos instead of printed ones. That's right, before Lego figured out how to print designs directly onto plastic, they just slapped stickers on the torsos instead. The kids of that era absolutely hated them because after a few months, the stickers would peel off at the edges, collect dirt, and just look terrible. But now, collectors want these stickered torsos more than anything because they're so rare. Most of them got destroyed or the stickers fell off completely, so finding one in good condition is like finding treasure. But if you want to talk about cool printing details, let's talk about classic space sets. A lot of these sets from 1978 to 1987 had a brick with their set number printed right on the hull, like LL928 on the Galaxy Explorer from 1979. The LL stood for Legoland because space was originally part of the Legoland theme before it became its own thing. Lego stopped doing this in 1987 when the new era started with Futuron and Blacktron. It's one of those details that makes classic space sets feel more authentic and connected. However, there's one part of classic space that might not be so authentic. The logo. That logo showing a spaceship circling a moon was directly inspired by the 1959 NASA seal. If you put them side by side, it's pretty obvious that Lego took some inspiration from NASA. But before Lego was making spaceships, they were making wooden toys, and the only reason they stopped is actually really sad. On February 4th, 1960, a massive warehouse fire destroyed Lego's entire wooden toy inventory. Everything was gone in one night, so the leaders had a choice to make. Should they rebuild the wooden toy line that they'd been making since 1932, or go all in on plastic bricks? They decided to bet on the future, so they chose plastic, ending 28 years of wooden toy production. But here's the crazy part. Two of old Kirk Christensen's sons were so pissed off about this decision that they quit in protest and started their own competing toy companies. They saw it as abandoning the family legacy, but obviously, history proved that Lego made the right call. Anyways, let's talk about why some vintage Lego bricks don't even work anymore. Lego's first bricks from 1949 to 1963 were made with cellulose acetate plastic, and over the decades, they got some seriously bad warping. If you have vintage bricks from that era and you try to connect them to modern bricks, there's a good chance they just won't fit properly because they've literally been out of shape over time. They also have this shinier finish compared to modern bricks, so it's pretty easy to tell if you're working with an old one. Eventually, Lego switched to a plastic that I'm just gonna call ABS, but it wasn't all at once. First, Lego Denmark switched to ABS plastic in 1963 because they realized cellulose acetate was complete garbage. But Samsonite, the luggage company that was making Lego for North America at the time, continued using cellulose acetate until 1970 just to save money. That's 7 years where kids in an entire continent were getting objectively worse bricks than others. Imagine being a kid in America trying to build something cool and your bricks don't even fit properly because Samsonite decided to cut corners. And it's not like they didn't know ABS was better. They just didn't want to spend the money to upgrade their production. Another terrible decision involving Samsonite was one of the worst business deals in Lego history. In 1961, Lego signed a 99-year exclusive licensing deal, giving Samsonite all North American rights to manufacture and distribute Lego products. In case you missed it, this deal was 99 years long. Lego's own leadership later admitted it was a massive mistake, and they had to buy back the rights after just 11 years for way too much money. They did this in 1972, so for over a decade, Lego was stuck watching Samsonite make low-quality products with their name on them, and there was legally nothing they could do about it. But here's something genuinely concerning about vintage Lego that most people don't know. Testing has confirmed that Lego bricks from the 1970s and 80s, particularly yellow and red ones, have cadmium in them, which is a known carcinogen. The levels detected are now illegal in both Denmark, where Lego is headquartered, and Washington State. So here's the irony. Denmark has some of the strictest cadmium regulations in the world, but their most famous toy broke those regulations for years. Obviously, Lego stopped using cadmium decades ago once they understood the risks. But if you have vintage yellow or red bricks from that era sitting in a bin somewhere, just be aware of what's in them. But let's move away from toxic bricks and talk about one of the weirdest sets Lego's ever made. In 1974, the Lego Family set had these giant figures with posable arms, but legs made out of of bricks stacked on top of each other. They looked really bizarre and kinda creepy, but here's the part that everyone jokes about. The set included a mother, a father, a kid, and a grandmother, but there was no grandfather. So for decades, LEGO fans have been making jokes about what happened to Grandpa. Did he die? Did they get divorced? Was he just not invited? Nobody knows, and LEGO never explained it. But despite the creepy design and the missing grandfather, it became one of the biggest sellers in the 70s. Demand was so insanely high that factory workers had to come in and work on public holidays just to keep up. Another weird fact about figures is that when minifigures launched in 1978, they all had the exact same face. 2 black dots for eyes and 1 simple smile. That's it. No eyebrows, no frowns, no angry faces, no variations whatsoever. And the craziest part is that it stayed this way for 11 years, all the way up to 1989. LEGO's philosophy was that kids should use their imagination to give the minifigures emotion, instead of the emotions being told to them with a frowny face or something. It was a bit of a weird philosophy considering how many faceplates we have now, but there's something really funny about these early minifigures. When they launched in 1978, every single male wore a hat, a space helmet, or some kind of head covering. Why? Because LEGO didn't know how to design hair pieces. They couldn't figure out how to make hair that looked good and fit properly on a minifigure's head. So every guy was either bald under his hat or just permanently wearing headgear. The first male hairpiece didn't come out until 1979, a full year after the minifigure's debut. So for an entire year, if you wanted a male minifigure with hair, you were out of luck. Oh, and about those faceplates. Everything changed in 1989 when the Pirates theme came out. This was the first theme to give minifigures different facial expressions. It had eye patches, beards, makeup, scars, missing teeth, and it was also the first theme to introduce body part variations like hook hands and peg legs. Designer Jens Nygaard Knudsen said a real pirate captain must have a patch on his eye, a peg leg, and a hook. So they couldn't just keep using the default faceplate. But in 1977, back before minifigures were even released, the designers made prototype molds for them out of Lego bricks themselves. They'd stack bricks into a box shape, pour silicone inside, let it harden, then carefully cut it open with a knife to make working prototype molds. So the very first test minifigures were literally made using molds built from Lego bricks. But the story today is wildly different. Now Lego uses 8 different molds to produce every single minifigure. You'd think it'd be simpler, but 2 of those mold sets are identical duplicates that are just reversed. One for molding the right arm and right leg, and another for molding the left arm and left leg. They have to be separate because of how the injection molding process works, but the precision is so ridiculously exact that minifigures from 1978 can still connect perfectly with minifigures from 2025. That's 47 years of perfect compatibility maintained across 8 different molds. But there was a certain type of minifigure that Lego refused to make for 10 years. The skeleton. Skeleton minifigures were designed all the way back in 1985, but when designers presented them, Lego management told them no because they made a dead minifigure. They had no intention of ever releasing it, so the skeleton design just sat in a drawer for an entire decade. After years of debates about whether depicting death was appropriate for a kid's toy, skeletons finally showed up in 1995 in both Pirates and Castle sets at the same time. Lego eventually got over their fear of showing death, and now skeleton minifigures are one of the most popular ones ever made. But before skeletons, the first non-human minifigure was actually a ghost in the castle theme. It was something completely new for multiple reasons. Obviously, it was a ghost, but that meant it didn't have legs. Instead, the torso attached to a 1x2 brick. But the coolest part, it was glow in the dark. Kids absolutely loved it because not only was it a completely new design, but it glowed in the dark, which was the coolest thing ever in 1990. Speaking of castle, there's a minifigure in this theme that made history in 1993. The blue wizard Magisto from the Dragon Knights theme was the very first Lego minifigure to have his own name. Before Magisto, every minifigure was completely generic, just knight or astronaut or police officer. But Magisto was different. He had a name, a backstory, a personality, and he appeared in multiple castle sets as a recurring character. He was the beginning of LEGO creating actual named characters with identities instead of just generic placeholder names. So without him, I never would have been able to make my video about minifigures with hidden lore, and I love that video. Anyways, now let's talk about Legoland, because its opening was way more successful than anyone expected. When Legoland Billund opened on June 7th, 1968, LEGO thought it would get about 300,000 visitors at most in its first season, but everyone else in the company thought it was an insane overestimation. However, they hit that number in just a few months. By the end of the season, 625,000 people had visited, which was more than double what they thought the most amount of people would be. The park was built using 6 million Lego bricks and needed thousands of truckloads of soil to be brought in just to even out the land and be able to build everything. But the reason Legoland even opened in the first place is something you're not gonna believe. In the mid-1960s, about 20,000 people per year were showing up at the Lego factory in Billund uninvited, just wanting to see display models and watch how bricks were made. Godfred Christensen was getting so annoyed by random factory visitors constantly disrupting production that he had Legoland built just to give them something else to look at. That way, when random people wanted to see Lego stuff, they could go there instead of interrupting production. Bro literally built the most famous theme park ever just to get people to go away. It's so insane. Anyways, let's get back to the space theme for a second, because 1987 was a massive turning point. You've probably heard people talk about space and classic space like they're two different things, and they definitely are, don't get me wrong. But what separates them, and when did it happen? Well, classic space ran from 1978 to 1987, and the change to space is defined by one singular piece: the visorless helmet. It's the most iconic helmet in LEGO history, but in 1987, LEGO introduced completely new helmets with movable clear visors for the Futuron theme, and that single helmet change marked the official end of the classic space era. Old classic space sets were still being sold through 1988, but they started incorporating new colors and designs, and when Space Police launched in 1989 to fight Blacktron, nearly every single Space Police set had a modular jail cell. And here's the best part: they came pre-stocked with Blacktron prisoner minifigures. The jail cells were designed to be interchangeable between all the different vehicles and bases, so kids could combine different sets and build their own massive prison fleet. It was one of the first times LEGO really leaned into cross-set compatibility, where buying multiple sets gave you stuff that worked together. But the coolest space faction has to be M-Tron from 1990. It wasn't just aesthetically cool with its red, black, and neon green color scheme. The sets featured actual working magnets built into crane attachments that could physically pick up and transport small cargo containers. But for some reason, M-Tron was marketed completely differently depending on where you lived. In Europe, they were marketed as a rescue faction that saved people, while in America, they were marketed as a mining faction that extracted resources. They were the same exact sets, but they had completely different backstories depending on what side of the Atlantic you were on, which makes absolutely no sense. But what weird fact about vintage LEGO surprised you the most? Be sure to let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.